And welcome back to my video. As you know, it is literally near the end of the month. Today is January 30th, and I have finally finished my secondary book of the year. Technically, it was my first book of the year, but I finished a book last month too, so I'm counting it as number 2 just because I want to, and no one can tell me otherwise. But this is a series I do once a month if you're new here, where I complete 24 books that I had in my apartment in the last 2 years. And today we're talking about the second book that I completed, which was kind of a long read. I'm not gonna lie, and yes, I did need the entire month to finish it. You know, it has like 400 pages. Don't question it. I'm a working woman. Thank you. But it is called The Glorious Guiness Girls. And disclaimer, there will be spoilers. Okay, I'm not sure how people think, but spoilers will be included. So if you want to read this book, probably click off. If you want my overall review, you will hear it while I spoil it. So stay for the book. Hello. I don't think I'm going to do this separately as I do my anime review, where I tell you the synopsis, I tell you my thoughts later, because this book is a little bit difficult for me to understand. So a few other disclaimers. This is also a historical fiction book. So according to the author's note in the very end of the book is based on the real life girls that were the Guinness girls, the people who are a family of the beer company, obviously. But it's fictional and certain characters who are in place in it just tell you more of their story, even though it is still fictional. Secondary, there's a lot of politics in this book, and it's within the Irish versus the British, and I don't really know too much about that. Even with the book telling me like, oh, this is what happened during the war, I'm still looking very confused and being like, wow, I don't get it. I don't get it. I just know like the basics, like Irish does not like the British because like the British are being taken over. They're taking over like Ireland, yeah. So if you read this book or you've read the book and you're just like, she didn't really explain it very well with the politics, I apologize in advance because I could not tell you heads and tails of why parts of the story was going different directions because of where they lived. But I will do my best in explaining like the major parts of the story, which really just include the girls and whoever was in their lives. The war just pushes the story along. It pushes where they are in the setting and how they grow up with the other people who are fictional. But overall, if I do get the politics wrong, I apologize, but I'm not a historian, nor do I know anything about the war outside what the book told me. And even then, I'm like over my head 100%. But basically, let's get into it. So we are mixing up the synopsis with my thoughts, just because I don't know what my thoughts are going to be. So it's just a synopsis. It's just like book club. I've never been in book club, so this is my book club. But essentially, the story takes place with the 3 glorious Guinness girls, and I'm going to mispronounce and butcher all the names. The spelling will be on the bottom. But there is the youngest girl. She is Onog. It's like eggnog, but with an O, but it's not spelled like that. She is the youngest Guinness girl. And then there is Maureen. She is the middle child. And there's Eileen. She is the oldest kid. And they're like separated by like 2 years apart. And then there's this main character who you see from her first point of view. This girl named Felicity, and I do not remember her last name. I honestly don't even think they said it more than one time. But yeah, they actually never say her last name. But she is considered a fictional character of the storyline. So while the girls are real, the fictional character Felicity is not. But she is not related to this family at all. But her mom pushes her to go to live with his family because I guess you're gonna find out the mom was depressed. The mom had depression. She couldn't take care of Felicity anymore, but she knew the Guinness family because somewhere down the line of their ancestry, they were like connected by like distant relatives or whatever. So she pushes her to go live with them. And Felicity is from Dublin, Ireland. And she goes to this place that I'm gonna put on the bottom because I legit forgot how to pronounce this, but it starts with a G. And she lives with them for like several years. And it's 1920, so it's in the 1920s. This is around the time before Ireland really started to have a revolution against the British, or what they considered a free state, where they revolt around the British taking over their land. But in this part, she has already left Ireland, and she's in where London is, but not really, if that makes sense. Basically where the British are, you know? And at this point, she is around 12, 13 years old, and she's living with this family, and she's very confused because these family are obviously very well off. They have a whole mass of servants, mass of maids, and they're very prim and proper in what they do. But she comes from a really poor family. She doesn't really understand like too much about how they live. Her mom has depression. Her older brother goes to school named Huey, but she can't go to school because she's a girl. You know how it is. And so when she gets to this family, she knows these girls go to school, but like, girl school. You know how to be like dancing and how to do stitching and all that stuff. And while she lives there, you kind of hear a lot about her thoughts of being not like them. And that's the current theme of the story, is that she is not like these girls. No matter how much she lives with them, no matter how many trips she goes with them, she will never be seen as a Guiness girl. And not because she wants to be seen, but as time goes on, she will always be known as like, oh, that's the girl who goes or lives with them. And it's like, later on in the story, she just lives with them for a long time. But when she starts off, she's very mellow, very quiet in her endeavors, because she does not know like what she can do with this family or why she's here. Because realistically, they're not related. They have no reason to like look at her and be like, oh, we're friends now. But she kind of is staying with this family. And each of these girls have their own personality, obviously. Onog is the youngest, so obviously you would think she's a lot more hype, but because she has as well the mother's nagging, Chloe as a mother, she nags the most on Onog because she is the youngest, but also because she has like golden blonde hair, and locks. She looks like a porcelain doll, which is what they call her. But because the mom nags her a lot, she's a lot more reserved and very quiet. And her shell doesn't get broken until like Felicity is there, and she uses her as like a guide to get out of her mom's like shadow or whatever spotlight her mom has put on her to be like, you gotta be like this and that and this and that, whatever. Then she uses Felicity for that. So she becomes a lot less, it wanes in and out. She becomes a lot less. Why? Because of Felicity. But in other cases, it gets worse because Chloe is a mom, I guess. And then there's the middle child, Maureen, and she's very brash. She's very loud. She makes herself seen in every storyline and every interaction that she has. She's overly the top, not the prim and proper that you expect from a Guinness girl or someone who's like very wealthy or is like considered to be like in the British life of like royalty almost. Like she's very like brash and loud, and she lets you know that she is. She's very funny in that way, but her humor comes off as kind of rude and outgoing, while most people will be like, oh, that's not, you probably shouldn't say that. She'll just be like, and what about it? And she'll just keep it moving. So that's her personality. And then Eileen, she's the oldest, and she keeps with herself as more mature. She's trying to get away from her sister's shadow, because in reality, they all look more or less alike in their endeavors, especially when they're like really young. So Onog is around 11 years old. Maureen and Felicity are around the same age, so like 12, 13. And then Eileen is 15 years old around that point. And she's trying to get away from her siblings, not shadow, but her personality is so much more mature that she doesn't really have like so much of a separation of her own siblings, because Maureen is the one that brings out the party of people, or at least it's so crazy that makes you realize, oh wait, she's a little cuckoo for beans, but she's a Guinness, so you really can't tell her anything. But I'm just gonna move the story along because there's a lot of parts that I'm like doesn't really matter for the storyline, so I'm just gonna move the part. So the storyline goes from 1920s to like 1978, which like includes the entire war between the Irish and the British and her time of living there, to when she like eventually moved away, 1978, right? And the storyline kind of jumps back and forth between those 2 years, 1920 versus 1921 versus 1922 to 1978, where now I wouldn't say the present time because you don't really stay in 1978 for very long. But I'm gonna tell you what 1978 happened at the very end, just to keep up with continuity purposes, because it doesn't really matter for this storyline what they were doing, because it's not like when you read the book, you're kind of like you're not confused, but it's not the biggest thing versus what she went through. And so we're just gonna skip a few years because she's lived with this family for a while now, like a few years, and she doesn't really fit in, obviously, right? These people are very nice. Clearly, they like her. They very much don't want her to fail living with her. She still sees herself as an outsider. She doesn't know why they took her in, because realistically, she didn't grow up with these girls. Like, these girls are literally strangers. They're not even friends with her mom for real. They're just like distant cousins, which I guess is like the current state of the Guinness family. They have a bunch of family members in real life, so that's how it is in the story as well. But the one thing she looks forward to every year is seeing her brother named Huey. He goes to, I wouldn't call it a boarding school, but he goes to a school where he's taught normal things, I guess. And he comes to see her like every once in a while for several years, and he is like her North Star almost, because he gives her all the things that he learns at school and he teaches it to her in that sort of way. And for her, she loves to learn, she loves education, but it's kind of how where her and her brother separate. He doesn't like education, but she loves education, but she can't teach. She can't go to school and he can't. So he gives her like the things she doesn't know, which is a lot, because he is seeing more of like the middleman or the middle class people to lower class people who live in the street of like, Britain and Ireland, and see the struggle of the people trying to like fight against the rights to like own their own land. While Felicity here, she's living in this gorgeous big old home, going back and forth to like their home in London and their home in this place that I can't pronounce it to this day. And while they're doing that, she doesn't see anything about the poor people. Like, she's poor herself. Her mom is poor and she grew up poor, but she doesn't see that life. Like, she doesn't ever like notice it. So when he retells her these things when he comes to visit her at the house, in the Guinness house, he's like, oh, here's what we do. But he doesn't tell her everything, because she is like, I'm not sure how much younger she is from him, maybe like a few years younger. But he doesn't tell her everything because some parts of him doesn't want to scare her, because like, you're talking about revolution against like two warring locations. So it's not something he wants to tell her, especially since she doesn't understand what's going on. But when Huey leaves, she loses that North Star. I mean, she becomes like very observant. I would say if you're a really quiet person, or you're not really like a talkative person, maybe you're an introvert, whatever, you become a very observational person, and you see from her point of view, she is literally observing the girls. So her part in this house isn't meant to be like a replacement for a sibling or another daughter for Chloe, who is the mom of the three girls. It's almost like she's supposed to replace one of the staff members named Gunny, who is almost like a secondary maid to Chloe, but realistically, she's Chloe's cousin. So you don't really know why she's considered like a maid, or is seen as a maid for Chloe, and she just takes care of what Chloe needs. Because I'm not sure what's wrong with Chloe. She had like some illness that is like makes her really sick and really tired for years to come. They don't ever tell you what it was. So you kind of just like, okay, well, she's just sick. Okay, like a real physical ailment is hurting her. So Gunny does all the work that she wants. Like anything she wants, she's like happy to do it for some reason. I don't know why. She just seems happy to be there. But part of the story is that Felicity is meant to not replace Gunny because she's a child, but to do similar things that Gunny is doing now, which is like helping Chloe out when she needs like reading a book, or making her tea, or giving company to her, whatever. This is one part in the story where the dad comes home because he runs the actual beer company of Guinness, and he's like, okay, we're gonna go to Japan or whatever, and we're gonna go travel, because they travel a lot. Well, the dad does, but sometimes they travel, which is why they go around Europe. But for once, they're going to Asia, and the kids are so excited, like, oh, cool, we go to Japan, whatever. And this is like one of the defining moments for Felicity, because while the girls were getting ready to go to Japan, Chloe was like telling Felicity, like, oh, Felicity, you don't have to go. You can stay with me. And at this point, I don't think she could have, she probably could have been like, I don't want to stay. I want to go to Japan with the girls. But I think she kind of understood her role in that moment, where it was like, I'm not here to like be a daughter. I'm here to like be an assistant, not really a maid or a servant, but I don't really have a place here, and my place is to be a helper, and my helper is with Chloe, which, personally sucks. So she kind of just stays with Chloe the entire time. So that's when she's realized, like, oh, I actually don't have a real place. But the girls go to Japan, and a few years go by, and the girls are a little bit older now, and the personality of what they are stay the same, but as they get older, Onog, I'm gonna keep butchering names, I'm sorry. The youngest, she basically grows more withdrawn, because she literally has Chloe in her ear at all times, telling her, you're not good enough, you're not great enough, da da da. And it's kind of told through Felicity that the reason why Chloe is still doing this is because, one, Eileen, she's the oldest, right? She's already out here having a car, driving around the city, like doing whatever she wants, so she doesn't even be at home for very long. And then Maureen, she's like a wild card. Like, she will listen to her mom, but she will like argue back and get her way, because Chloe really can't control her, mainly because she's sick of something, and because like the end of the day, it's her own daughter, so she can't truly say no unless she really means it, and then you listen to her anyway. But it's Maureen, right? If she tells you that she wants to do something, she's gonna steamroll you and then do it anyway. So you really don't. It's like you're, I don't know, like having a daughter. I don't know. I don't know. So Onong is the only person she can truly like talk about and tell, like, oh, Ona, like fix your hair, or fix your hat, or sit up straight like a woman, or whatever. So she gets really withdrawn, and she sits away, and you don't really hear about her for a while because she no longer wants to be part of the story, and Felicity doesn't really see her because she's somewhere in one of the many rooms that are empty. And Maureen, she has her season. And if you watch Bridgerton, you know a season is basically when a girl of age basically goes to like a ball where they learn how to do more prim and proper things, and they basically find someone to marry. I am skipping Eileen's season because she already had one, like, I think years prior, and it wasn't that big of a story for the book for them to really tell you much about it. And Maureen one is a lot more important. And at this point, Felicity is really going everywhere they go, in terms of where they are in this location. Eventually, they do move to London because around this point, the Irish, who are considered themselves like the Free State or the anti-treaty party, they are fighting against the British to fight to have their own revolution, have their own lands. So it becomes a lot more dangerous for the girls to kind of walk around the city, even with supervision, because they can get hurt, and people are dying in the streets. People are going not to war, but are like, take up arms during protests, and it becomes a lot more unsafe to really walk the streets at this point. So wherever they go with a chaperone. And at this point, it's Gunny, Chloe's cousin. So at this point, Maureen is going with Felicity to her season, and there's a lot of girls there, and they kind of see them, and the Guinness girls are famous everywhere. Like wherever they go in Europe, and probably Asia, and probably America, I mean the whole world, right? They are really popular. But Maureen, she kind of sticks to like a sore thumb because she's very brash and very loud of a person. And even during the season, she doesn't change. She stays the same way the entire time. It was kind of a problem because the other girls are taught to be like quiet, mature, like they gossip here and there, but keep it like Bridgerton, like literally just, to themselves, and they talk amongst themselves, become friends or whatever. And a lot of these girls knew each other since like birth, so they already are friends, right? Like they're not really looking, they click, so they don't really looking for new people. So when Maureen comes into the picture and she's herself, they're just like, oh, that's cute, and they just kind of walk away from her. So a lot of the times when she's trying to interact with these girls, especially for preparation for the season, they tend to move away from her and not really show like any love for her to be there, and basically ostracizes her from the rest of the girls. And she feels it, she sees it. And Felicity kind of tells us like, oh, she knows why the girls are doing this. And she tried to tell Maureen, like you're supposed to, like, maybe don't be yourself or don't be so brash, because they're not used to that. And she's just like, oh, I'm not doing that. Like, she just stays the same. She stays the same. And at this point, long story short, the season goes by and she doesn't really get any matches because it is what it is. No one really liked her personality. Even the teachers had a hard time dealing with her. But throughout the whole thing, Felicity is there with her, and she is seen as the helper for Maureen, or really just like the extra kid in the Guinness family. So she keeps to herself the entire time. And this is a part where the story kind of expands outside of the Guinness girls. It's during when the parties for the season near the end, they go out to a party with this girl, I think named Elizabeth. I probably am thinking of the wrong person. Maybe her name was Baby. It was either Elizabeth or Baby. Yes, that is the name they go for when the characters is literally Baby. At this point, she is Eileen's friend, so she's a little bit older than the girls. And she takes them to a party that's like, I don't know, a few blocks away. So they walk in the rain, whatever. And this party, as I said, 1920s, right? What happens in the 1920s is the roaring 20s, right? So they go to this party. It's basically a flapper party. And you see dancing, they see booze, they see all these amazing things that they've never seen before, which is like a really crazy rave party, right? In a really lavish old home. And Maureen and Felicity stay there. Maureen's having a great time. Maureen fits right in. She loves it. Felicity is just there. She sees it as what it is, as a party that's meant to be outside of the norm, and she likes that, but she doesn't really bond with it. She's here to support Maureen, and that's really the storyline of what it has. Like, you realize Felicity doesn't have her own like life or her own storyline outside of just being with the girls and knowing the situation and always telling you like, this is kind of the reason why they act like this, and this might be what they're thinking, but I won't tell you that. I won't say it to them, but this is what I believe is like the reason why they feel so withdrawn. Like, she gives you their inner thoughts without being the person who has the inner thoughts. So she's not her own person like later on in the storyline, which is fine, but also gives off the vibe of like, once she realizes that she's not considered a Guinness girl or even really in their family, it becomes more of like, oh, she's a narrative for their lives, which technically she's a fictional character that was meant for that, but the author was like, we'll give you a real life later. But at this point, this is when Maureen realized like, these people are pretty cool, I'm gonna hang out with these people. So she figured out that she finds out Baby, Elizabeth, and some other characters I totally forgot. But she learns about these people. After a while, they go back to the season so that Guiness doesn't realize they're gonna miss her. But after that, they realize, hey, we met some new friends. Those friends are way cooler than the season, way cooler than what we do at home. I'm gonna hang out with them still. So essentially, long story short, Maureen hangs out with these people. They're kind of bad influences. They kind of run around London and Britain all over to do like hide and seek and tag. They're really like, I'm not sure if they're as rich as the Guinness girls, but they're very well off. So they're able to do whatever they want without consequences. Even Maureen does whatever she wants, and Chloe really isn't trying to be like, oh, policing her or anything. But to be fair, Maureen does lie about several things that she does with them because she doesn't want to be having a chaperone. So at this point, she's no longer walking around with a chaperone, and they moved away from where the war between the Irish Party and Britain is happening. But around this part, Huey comes back. He comes back like every year. By this point, he comes back again, and he's talking to. He's a lot more knowledgeable in politics, and he's trying to talk to Felicity about it, and she understands very little, but she wants to be like knowledgeable, so she lets him talk about it. But then the dad, who is Chloe's husband, but the kid's dad, named Ernest, I think, he basically doesn't really like the fact that the Irish Party is happening because him as a British person, you know, isn't Guinness Irish? That's so funny. Anyway, he doesn't like the Irish Party because they are killing people who give them jobs, and he has a lot of workers or whatever, and he lets them do the protesting, and if they come back to work, he doesn't answer any questions because realistically, he's not trying to like fall in the realm of like, I'm gonna die because, you know, X, Y, and Z, they don't like me. So he lets them do whatever they want, but realistically, he doesn't like the Irish Party. And Huey at this point is older. Couldn't tell you what his age is, 17, I'm guessing. But he is telling Ernest like, the Irish people just want their own freedom. They want their own play. They just don't want to be like sharing land with people who they own first just because they were like, you know, taken over or whatever, or like held hostage in their own lands. And the conversation goes like that for a while. And yada, yada, yada. Ernest doesn't like it. I'm trying to figure out what happened realistically, but I'm like, I don't really remember exactly, but I know Ernest doesn't like it. It goes against what he stands for. So he shuts the conversation down and whatever. And he tried to talk, and then he goes to Felicity and he tries talking to her and like, I'm probably not going to come back and visit. And she's like, what are you talking about? You have to come back and visit me. You always visit me. And she's like, he's still to this day the North Star of her life and keeps her grounded in what is happening in the real world versus the girls who do more or less what they want. Yes, they are adjusting to life as they get older, and with the war, not the war, but the protesting, they adjust to that around them, but it's not as drastic as people who literally are dealing with the protesting in their own backyard. Like, so he is her grounding since she is from Ireland herself, and this is more or less pertaining to her in a way. You know, realistically, she doesn't ever go back to Ireland. I mean, a little spoiler early on, she doesn't go back to Ireland. She does one time, but I'll get to that. But essentially, she's like, I gotta go back, whatever. And at this point, he's been coming like every year for the last several years. And every time, Maureen talks to him. And they have a great old time, and she makes him laugh, and it's really cute. And you kind of expect they're gonna be like, you know, together and married and whatever. But at one point, he's like, I gotta go home, I gotta go, I gotta go back. And she gets really pissed at him because all he wants to talk about is politics and about what's happening at him during the revolution and whatever. And she gets really pissy at him. And then because she is her brash, no filter herself, she says something rude to him. And he's like, heard. And then he just kind of walks away and then tells Felicity, I probably won't come back anymore. And it was at that moment that he like walked, I guess he had a horse or whatever. He drove away, whatever. And Maureen would never tell you this, but she did feel really bad for what she said because she's used to having her own way and she's used to saying whatever she wanted. But the moment that she had someone like Huey get hurt or just like not reciprocate what she said, she realized like, oh, she went too far. Like it was too far, and she really didn't like this person. So she gets a letter to Felicity to give to her brother, who is at this point no one knows where he is. Like it's been a few days at this point after he left, and he usually comes every few times, whatever, a week or whatever. And so she gives it to instead of giving it to Huey's best friend who comes with him named Richard, she gives it to Thomas. And Thomas, he is one of the new helpers, one of the new servants of the Guiness home, and he's very quiet, keeps himself. He doesn't let Maureen bully him or whatever. He just keeps himself, and he just doesn't fall for the trap of oh, they're rich, so I gotta do what they say. He just does his job and does it well, and Maureen hates that because she's like, well, I talked to him, he won't come back, and it's what do you want him to do, right? And so she gives him the letter instead of Richard. Richard comes with Huey. He's not that important, so I didn't talk about him previously. But she doesn't give it to Richard because realistically, Richard doesn't know. I don't think he knows where Huey is after he hasn't come to visit for a while. So she gives it to Thomas, and Thomas just takes the letter and puts it in his pocket. Now, the letter is from Maureen, and Maureen has told Felicity, do not read it. Give it straight to Huey whenever he comes. But later that same night that the letter gets given to Thomas, Ernest tells the girls, hey, Huey is no longer allowed to come to this house anymore. He can't come here. He's not a good influence on you guys. And Maureen's obviously upset. She's like, why not? What did he do? Because he disagrees with you? He stands 10 toes, and he's like, he's not allowed to come back here. Which kind of sucked because you never, obviously the politics was the biggest difference, but you don't really know why. And at this point, Huey never does come back to the house. And after a while, Thomas is missing, and no one knows where Thomas went. And people are assuming that Huey and Thomas both joined the Irish anti-treaty party to help them fight the revolution against the British or whatever. And Richard, who was best friends with Huey at the time, he still comes to visit at some point, and he talks about how he doesn't know what Huey is. And even when he knew that he was talking about politics, he always tried to shut it down because obviously the side that he was choosing was very dangerous. And Huey always wanted to join the protests, but it was where they did most of the crime and stuff. So he always questioned oh, would this even be a smart idea for Huey to do? But now Huey's missing, and Thomas is said to be in Venezuela somehow. How he got there when he was a servant making probably less money than the girls, I have no idea. But he was rumored to be there, and Huey wasn't. So it was very weird. But no one ever talked about Huey after a few months because he never came. Maureen still looked out for him every day. She was always in the streets being oh my God, after a while she just pretended that she wasn't. She was very proud. She would never tell you if she was wrong. She would know how you're feeling if you really hated something, but she would never truly care. She knew, she was kind of an empath in that regards, but she really didn't care about whether or not it hurt your feelings, unless it made her feel bad personally, and it never really did. At times when it was hurting Felicity's feelings, she always apologized in her own way, which was never the words. It was always just oh, I didn't mean it, right? And you're just but Felicity started to realize this is just how Maureen is. So she takes nothing that she says seriously, because everything is a joke, even though things can be serious for her, but she would never make it serious because then it'll have to be not said in such a rude way. But anyway, after a while, no one really talks about Huey anymore, and the only people who really talk about him is Odog, and she's still depressed and whatever, but eventually she gets to the point where she's 15, 16 years old, and she's able to go out with Maureen, with those new girls, with Baby, Elizabeth, all these other people for their extravagant parties of drinking in the roaring 20s and whatever, as long as Felicity's there, because she is still young, right? And it's great for her because she's able to go out a lot more. She's no longer stuck in the house with her mom, who was nagging the shit out of her and making her actually depressed. And around this time, it's the season's over, or whatever. And I'm gonna say a year, and it's wrong, but it's 1926, right? Whatever. And at this point, there is this other person living in the house that's always lived there. I just never said her name either because she wasn't important until like somewhat now. Her name is Mildred. She is one of the cousins of the girls, like a real cousin. And she's from America, but she's always lived there because her mom can't take care of her or she's poor or whatever. I don't remember. But she kind of tells Felicity one day, like, hey, what do you plan on doing? Are you planning on living in this house forever? And not in a mean way. She's not saying it to be like, why are you here? And why won't you go home? Because like realistically, like she's not like she's a cousin, yes, but she's not really seen as part of the family either. The girls don't really like her because she's so strict. She's like kind of older than Eileen. But even then, it's like she has the will to want to be like a nurse for war. So she's studying to be a nurse for war, whatever. So she's literally asking Felicity, like, what do you want to do? Do you really want to stay here all your life, knowing they're going to treat you like Gunny and be like a little helper for Chloe, whatever? And Felicity never thought about that. She's literally never been like, oh, I should probably figure it out like my life, because the only person who ever asked her this was Huey. And when Huey was around, he would only say like, do you want to live with me when I graduate from school? And she was like, yeah. And now that he's missing, she has no direction in life because he was her direction, North Star, right? And so she's like, I have no idea. I have no idea what I want to do. And Mildred is like, why don't you go to this school that teaches you how to typewrite? Basically, if you ever watch Violet Evergarden, they do like letter writing or whatever. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing, and she writes letters for people. I don't know. It's like typewriting, but they don't really say what you do with it. I'm assuming it's for people who can't write or read. I don't know. But she tells her, like, you should go do this. You should go to training and do this, right? And it'll be very good for you to learn a skill outside of just being here, because if you live here your whole life with no skills to speak of, you're not going to leave, and it's not the world you think it is if you're going to be forced to be like a worker for people who you really aren't going to like bond with. Like the girls love Felicity, but it's like living with your best friend your whole life and not really being adopted. And then you always just feel like you're kind of a burden and an impact way, like the Guinness girls are loaded, so whatever. But, Felicity takes it to heart. She asks Ernest, who, the father, who runs the beer company, of course, and is like, hey, I want to do this because she needs money for this. And she doesn't have any money for her own because she doesn't have any allowance. And the first person she talks to about this before Ernest was Maureen, because she wants to know Maureen if this would be like a good idea for her to do. And Maureen is like, sure, you can do it as long as you go to parties with me, which is like hilarious. But she said like she'll talk to her dad about giving her an allowance so she can go to the school and pay for it, as long as Felicity goes to parties with her, because she likes having her around, even though she doesn't actually. In the book, she's so quiet, but she is like the person you always would bring around, because like no matter what, she's observant enough to know when things can go wrong and is there to help you out if things ever arrive, or if you're having too much fun. She's like there to like kind of see it and be a part of it anyway. So she's very astute in her learning, and so that's why Ernest is able to say, yeah, I love the idea that you're trying to like do more for yourself. Most women couldn't even go out to school because that's not what they did in the 1920s. So she goes to this typewriting school like almost every day. And it's great. She loves it. She's having a great time. It's hard, right? But she's having a great time. And every night she goes, every day she goes to the school. And every night Maureen and Ogag just Maureen. Just Maureen goes to these parties sometimes. And then she goes into her room in the morning and then she talks about her day. And then she sleeps on her bed every time she goes out. It's so funny. By this point, Onog, she's no longer going out because she used Felicity as a reason to go out. And because Felicity isn't going out, she can't go out. So she becomes more depressed. So Felicity tried to help her out by giving her work to do with the typewriting. But because Onog doesn't leave the house and has nothing to do outside of that, she gets really bored, really depressed again. And so she stays depressed for like a while. I think at some point she takes up smoking at 16 and she drinks a little bit too, which surprisingly doesn't cause her to be like an alcoholic or a chain smoker in the future. So I'm not sure about that part. But Felicity loves her job. She needs a new friend named Jen, and Jen is this person who is actually poor, right? Lives with her family, who has several siblings, and her, I think, a cousin as well. And she talks about how she wants to one day move out of her mom's house and live on her own. And she wants Felicity to live with her. But the thing is, Felicity never tells her like she's living with the Guinness girls. She always tells them like she's living with friends who are well off. So she doesn't tell. But here's the thing: Jen loves not gossip, but she loves drama. So she always reads like the gossip column in the newspaper. And like, oh my god, I love them. Not knowing that Felicity lives with them. Because Felicity doesn't want to come off as this person who's so well off when she's literally not like that. And she's only like that because her mom was like, you gotta live with these girls like so many years ago. And so the storyline kind of continues. And at this point, I am blanking. That was crazy. But we're just gonna skip a few more years. So right now it is 1928 or whatever, and they're so and so years old. I think Eileen is like 22, and just subtract 2 years from everyone else. But at this point, there is a new person in their lives, and his name is. Who does Maureen end up? Skipping a lot. Just letting you know, I'm skipping a lot because a lot of the storyline is just a lot of people in their lives. And they kind of come and go, and the ones that stay don't really leave a lasting impact on their lives. They just are there for Felicity to have a lot of talking points about what they do and how their lives really revolve around the Guinness girls. But it's not necessarily like they made a contribution to the book overall. Like, yeah, like, it's like knowing another person's best friend. Like, they're just another best friend. But this is girl named Elizabeth, as I said before, and she is also well off at this point, but she is not as well off as the Guinness girls, but she has a job. I think she's a model / dressmaker, and she drinks heavily. And she is not really seen as the most societal person to be around because she does a lot of the parties that everyone talks about. But she also had a scandal where she basically hooked up with a married man at one point, and so she has a season. And this storyline is, if you read the book, I realize I'm skipping a lot. But her season, well, not her season, she gets married to this, like, her own guy. I forgot his name. Not the most important, but he's not the married man anymore. It's a new person. But the thing is, when she's about to get married, there is Onog, who is getting married first. And she is the second Guinness girl to get married at this point. I skipped Eileen's marriage because it wasn't the biggest of deals. Like, she got married to this guy named Brittany, who they met during the time of one of the parties that Maureen dragged the girls to go to. And they just hit it off, and they were really nice and funny. And Brittany, he doesn't really like Maureen's character, but he likes Eileen, who comes out as much more mature. So they get married, and it was great, and it was really lavish, and really big, yada yada. Anyway, but Elizabeth has this wedding, and right before her wedding, Onog has her wedding, and her wedding is with this guy that I forgot. I think his name is Paul or something. I'll put it in the bottom because I did forget his name. Thank you. And he basically helps her out. The reason how they met, they went to a pool party that Elizabeth actually hosted because I guess it was like her bachelorette party or something like that, or she just wanted to do a lavish party to prove that she can. And all the girls were there. They're all partying. They're all doing whatever. And a bunch of guys try to crowd Onog and Felicity for some odd reason. And they're just trying to be like, oh, Onog, she come with us, she come with us. And she's just over here like, and she took like some type of drug. I don't know, she took like, what do they call it? Like opium or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, she's a drug addict. But no, she was still lucid enough to be like, oh, these people are weird. Like, they're really trying to like come on to me. And it wasn't a good thing. So the person who helped her out was this guy named Paul. If it's not right, I'm gonna keep flashing the name that's correct. And he basically pulls her out of the situation with Felicity, and it's like, "Are you okay?" Like he tells the guys to back off because they're scaring her. They're scaring Felicity because it's like 5 or 6 guys crowd them to be like, "No, you can come with us, you can come with us," and they're in like swimsuits. So it's like, you know. And the storyline kind of picks up from there. Like, they hit it off. They become like, he becomes her young man, which is like engaged to be or fiance, and they get married. And it's like the most lavish wedding ever. But of course, Elizabeth is upset because it happens like, I would say, a week and a half before her own marriage, and no one's gonna look at her marriage and be like, oh wow, you have such a good one, because she's always comparing herself to the Guinness girls. You know, she's not related, though at this point everyone's related, but she always sees herself like competing against them because everyone loves them. You know, whatever they do is kind of crazy. and she's crazier, and she doesn't get the same vote. I don't know why she might be competing because of the scandal, but anyway, the wedding was lavish. It was amazing. It was beautiful. She loves her husband. It's great. And Elizabeth has her marriage, and that happened, right? Whatever. And the story kind of picks up from there. Maureen isn't married yet, but it is now 1930. I think this is the year that she gets married. She gets married to this man named Duff, who is considered like years prior they met him at like one of the parties. And he's very political. He speaks about politics. He's very like sophisticated in what he says, and I guess he's hot. Because Maureen starts to change. And she changes the way she speaks. She changes the way her attitude is when she's around him. And she wants to learn more about politics to speak with him. So you realize this is the first time she thought about someone else while having her own personality. Not dwindle, but like you don't stay the same as you get older. You change. She never changed. Now she changed for a different person because she realized her personality does not fit a lot of people. And if you're someone that you personally like, you might want to tone it down if you're a little cray-cray. And so she does. And then she gets married to him as like the last Guinness sister to get married, which she's okay with. I mean, she wasn't okay when her younger sister Ona got married because she's younger, and it's like, why is she getting married before me? But she got married and she was happy, and she was drinking literal alcohol from the bottle because they didn't have cups, they had champagne. She was basically herself at the wedding. She drank it like a drunken sailor. It was actually kind of fun. Like, she's actually my favorite sister because even though she's like her 20s at this point, 22, she still acts the same way as she was as a kid. And it's not to say she's childish, but her personality never dwindled. It was never coveted by her like wealth or status. And so it was just really good. But now it's like 1930 and she's married, whatever. And I think the stock market crashes in America. I couldn't tell you what was happening. I honestly don't remember the Great Depression occurred. I don't remember that year, but I think that's what happened because a lot of people lost their money around this time in America, and because our stock market is connected to a lot of countries. Britain also lost their money, and Ireland lost their money, all these other countries lost their money. So if you're really poor or you don't own like literally millions of dollars, you felt that loss. And the Guinness girls, they were still rich. Ernest came off as really anxious because of the losses that other people had, which probably affected his business. But they made sure to be like, oh no, they're so rich. And it's like, okay, like, hello. But at this point, Felicity was still working at the place that she had, right, with Jen. And Jen was like, we should move out together. And it's been like a year since she asked her, and she wants to know Felicity's answer. And Felicity asked Ernest, and Ernest is, well, no, she didn't ask Ernest. Ernest tells her money is safe because he was holding on to her money because he was investing it for her, which is smart. And he's like, yeah, I kind of saw this coming, so I moved it. And I was like, okay, but he still looked, scared. So clearly he didn't think too much about it happening until it happened. But essentially, once Maureen gets married, she also moves out. She moves out to be with Jen in like some other location. She actually does not go back to Ireland at all, which I did skip a little bit, but I'll go back a little bit, rewind. So she goes back to Ireland like one time to be with her mom again, because once Huey is gone and he's, missing in action or whatever, she goes back to her mom for like, I think a year or so, because Huey would go live with her when she wasn't there. And I don't think Felicity likes her mom very much because she doesn't give off the vibe of her loving her very much. And because you realize at the end of the book she has depression, it makes a lot more sense, but she doesn't feel good living with her mom. So that's the only time she goes back. So I don't really think she sees herself as an Irish person anymore because she's lived with the Guinness girl for so long that her way of speaking is changing, her way of writing is changing, and the people of Ireland don't even see her as Irish. So it's like, well, I'm from London now. So that's what she says. But she says she's from Ireland and people don't believe her because it's like, you don't sound like it, you don't act like it, you don't look like it. So she's like, I'm just from London because it's easier, and at this point she's assimilated so much it doesn't matter. But in this point in time, she is now going to live with Jen. And there's the guy I said before, like one time, there's Richard, who is the best friend of Huey. He works for Ernest now. He actually works in the beer company in London. And he actually asked Felicity like several years ago prior if he could marry her, and he asked for her hand and everything. But she actually said no at the time because even though she had a lot of good conversations with him, And he's the kind of person who's very quiet unless you like are that kind of person who he can talk to. He wouldn't like speak up, right? And she was able to like get him to speak up and talk, and they had great conversations. But the thing about it was, she didn't want to be with him because she always felt like she was just Huey's sister to him. So she felt like it was like an obligation for him to be with her because he was the best friend of Huey, and he doesn't know where Huey is. So he's trying to take care of her by marrying her. So she kind of said no because she did like him, but she didn't want to be tied to that like title because it wasn't just what she was. But I think she did like him at the time. It just wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to know who she was outside of being Huey's sister to like, Richard. I was gonna say some people, but it's not that many people who think of her like that. But essentially, after the wedding happened, and she goes for Jen, Richard asks again, and they said that she said yes because now it's no longer like, oh, I think he thinks that I'm the sister. It's no like he likes me for who I am for real, and if he's willing to like act again after I just broke his heart the first time, then he really is not just like saying it because he would take care of me. He really does love me. And they don't give much thought into it. She did get married. I'm not sure if they got a big ass wedding or not. They don't tell you. And it's not just me skipping. They really don't tell you. But at this point, before she leaves to go live with Jen, Ernest kind of tells her the truth about what happened with Huey. He kind of tells her because I guess he was willing to talk to her more about her money situation and making sure that she has everything she needs to move out and stuff. And at this point, he was like, so we did find some truth about Huey or what's going on. But like obviously all the stuff was rumored, but because they don't have real evidence, the rumor was just seen as like the truth. But essentially, I'm gonna tell you what happened like all together because two different people tell her, and I just don't remember the separation. But essentially, Huey, the day that Huey left the house, and they were told like he can't come back here, whatever. He actually went straight to the like anti-treaty party, who were going, I guess, protest against like being connected with Britain before they were given like their own separation or independence or whatever, right? And around this part, I guess someone had like a gun or a rifle or whatever, and he was shot. And he was killed like the same day he left to go to the party and like kind of ran. And it took so long for people to really know the truth and for Ernest to figure it out because a lot of people had already died at this point in both sides of the party. And there wasn't that many people who were willing to talk about it, and nobody knew where his body was, and the rumors kind of like kept piling on for months. So it wasn't really known like what was true and what was just like people saying like, oh yeah, he died, but like we don't know, like because no one was recording like exactly. It wasn't like an official war, so it wasn't like anyone was like, oh yeah, and this person died. Like they don't know. There was so much rumors around that point that it was like, oh, he must have died, right? And it's been like at this point 4 years. I'm gonna guess 4 years since he died, and it was just like, okay, well, obviously, But he tells her that, and she's like, I think she was holding her a lot of her emotions, but I think she did say she thought of like a fake story of like what happened to him. Like maybe he moved away because of the war, because of the protests, or he's hiding with a family, whatever. But when he told her, it kind of like broke the illusion of like, oh, I can no longer think of him like missing in action because he really is dead now. It was a rumor, it's still like more justified in what she was thinking. And she kind of just like, I wouldn't say she moved on quickly. It just feels like a lot more sadness was in her that she doesn't tell anyone about what she was told about Huey. All of the girls loved Huey because she doesn't want it to be like a sad moment for them as well. Especially since it was her brother and she's dealing with it so much harder because she literally lived with him. And it's like Maureen, who loved him at one point, it's like, yeah, I don't want her to know about it on her wedding day. Because this does happen on the day she leaves, which is Maureen's wedding day. She does apologize to Maureen because the letter that I told you she was supposed to give to Richard, to give to Huey, she gives to Thomas. And she always felt guilt because she felt like before she knew that he was dead or missing in action, they just thought he didn't want to come, right? And she was being told, like, she always felt like because she had a Thomas, who didn't give it to Huey ever, that she was at fault for not giving a chance for Huey to come back. So she apologizes to Maureen. She didn't tell her the truth. She was like, I'm sorry for the letter. And she's like, girl, that letter was like years ago. Like, it was my fault for letting him, like, for saying all this stuff about him, whatever. And it was such an interesting way because she never apologized for anything. It was the one thing she apologized for. And at this point, Felicity still felt guilt because she didn't know the full truth about what happened with Huey, because that part comes later in 1978, where we are now transitioning to. And 1978 takes place within like 4 or 5 chapters within the whole book. So it does flip back and forth sometimes. But she's like in her 70s. Right. She's like 11 years old in 1920. It's 1978, and she's living with Richard. Onog is living with her husband. Maureen's living with, Maureen's husband is dead at this point. He's lived for like so years, I don't remember. But so she's a lot more, I would say a lot more mellowed out versus what she was prior, but she's also old. But after her husband died like decades prior, she's no longer like hopping from country to country. She's like staying put in like London. And Eileen, she's living with her husband too. And they kind of travel the world and stuff. And then Elizabeth, she died at 40 years old because of an alcohol problem, I'm not sure what happened with Jen. They don't give me the details on every character, but they do say, oh, these people married, some people died, whatever. Like some people, like Baby, who I talked about before, she had like a man at one point. He died from, he jumped. I don't know what, I'm not sure what happened. I think he committed suicide because someone said no to him. And it was really traumatic for him. I'm butchering that, but that is more or less what I remember. But in 1978, she's still in contact with the sisters, right? She's still like considered family to them. She knows still that she is still an outsider or whatever. And so she goes back to this old house that is in this location. And they have like paperwork there, like a lot of paperwork, a lot of pictures there that they never cleared out for some odd reason when they used to live there in like 30s, 40s, 50s. And so she goes there because she's asked by the sister, can you go in there and clean it up for us, make sure there's like nothing incriminating about us? And she goes there, she goes straight to like Thomas' old room. Because like I said before, Thomas in the 20s, he left to go to Venezuela, or that's where he's rumored to be. So she goes back to his room in the quarters, got like bags of paper, and she's looking for one specific thing. And you realize the one thing she's looking for is the letter that she gave to Thomas in 1920. Granted, it is 1978. Why would this letter even be in his room? Anyway, she gets this letter after like going through 3 bags of trash, which I don't know why it was in his room, but whatever. And she finds the letter and she reads it. And it's like literally in Maureen's fashion, because it has like one line of words. And the letter that she was going to give to Huey at one point literally said, "I'm sorry, forgive at Maureen." And I was like, considering that Maureen literally never apologized for anything, this is like the best you can do for her. Like this is her version of a long ass apology. So I was like, yeah, would have worked now. But she sees the letter and Felicity's like, wow, this is so in her fashion, whatever. And there's a girl who's like one of the maids who takes care of the house to this day for some reason. No one lives here. She is the granddaughter of Thomas. And Felicity's surprised because Thomas hasn't been seen in literal decades. And I'm doing the math in my head because I'm like, how are you a granddaughter? How old is Thomas? I'm like, oh, he's probably in his 70s. I'm like, okay, great. Like, I'm telling you the math, like, how are you a granddaughter? Okay, no, he's older, got it. And she's like, oh, Thomas is here. And she's like, oh, about him? She takes him to Thomas and he's cleaning up like the backyard of the house. Surprisingly, he still works there. I don't know why. I'm not sure who's paying him. But I guess, inheritance or whatever. And she talks to him and she's like, hey, so you didn't go to Venezuela? And long story short, he tells her part of what I just told you about Huey's death and how he got shot literally the day that he left, which is the same day that he was given the letter from Felicity. So he actually said that he was going to give it to Huey when she gave it to him. Like when she gave it to him, yes, he balled up and put it into his pocket, but he was willing to give it to Huey because he, like Huey and, Felicity is his sister, whatever. But he never got a chance to because he knew, I think a little bit earlier than Ernest did, that Huey was dead. And there was no way for him to stay because he kind of ran away with Huey. And I don't think he saw him die or anything, but it was like rumored around the same place that Huey was dead. And so he left to Venezuela to kind of like get away from all of the protesting and the war so that he wouldn't die. And he apologized to her because he felt I guess he carried the same guilt that she carried. She believed that if she gave the letter to Richard, for example, he would literally have had like Huey here, like literally years before he would have quote unquote gone missing. But in actuality, the letter wouldn't have done anything because he was dead like the moment he left the house, like days before. So it was never, or even in her mind, it was never Felicity's fault. You know, it never would have been, right? It's not like she could have prevented his death, but she felt like she could have. But he does apologize, which only shows that he has a lot of guilt for what he went through and what he believed he contributed to, because a part of him did talk Huey into doing the party. You know, he only had these same ideals. I don't think he really talked him into it. He did apologize, and she was like, it was a long time ago. And I think she's just dealing with it because she already knew that he was dead for years. And this just kind of relieves her of the guilt that she felt for like literal decades. Because even to this day, she was looking for a letter that was written in the 20s and it's 1978, right? And so her husband comes up, and it's Richard, and they're still married, and he's still alive, which is lovely. I don't know if they have kids. They didn't say anything about that. But basically, they go home, and she doesn't really tell anyone about the letter because in her mind, it's the one thing she has between the connection between her new life with the Guiness girls and her old life with Huey, who is dead. And yeah, that was literally the entire story, which all I can say is I think overall, if I had to think about it, use my brain for a second, the book really was about the girls and their struggles in their lives and how much changed within them and how much really stayed the same while everyone else was going through a hot mess. First with the protest war, second with the stock market crashing. It was more like you could have learned a lot more about someone else if you followed Jen, who was a girl from Felicity's work, for example, who worried more about the money that she lost and not so much about the dresses she could have bought that day. You know, I feel like if you follow someone else, you would probably have a more bigger storyline and more of an impact in what they went through, because I felt like they were going through the motions and not much changed for them. I could have been thinking about this all wrong. And I'm not gonna lie, I was gonna look this answer up because I was like, what is this book about? I'm so confused. What is this book about? Like, why did I just read this? Because it just follows the three girls as they navigate life in like multiple places and how their lives change. It's like a, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a, you know, like dating a life, like a slice of life storyline, basically. So every episode would just be about the girls and what they go through every day. But they never truly struggled. And yes, they have like moments of like, oh, Maureen going through her season, no one liking her, or Olaf having to like be depressed for years because her mom is like a little shit, or Eileen realizing that she needs to branch out to be her own person because she is too much like her siblings, and even being like the oldest and the mature one doesn't really, you know, make her different. Even Mildred, who I talked about literally one time, she wanted to go be a nurse. Like, she literally moved out of the state of being like considered a helper to just go do her own thing. And Felicity, while she has her own story and she literally made the change to be her own person the moment she went to go to like basically a trade school and work, it was still seen that you are the eyes and ears of the girls, and the girls were the main part of the story. Because even at the end, she looks for a letter that's between the girls and her brother, who is dead. Which I wish they didn't kill him. He's such a good person. But yeah. But apparently, the author had written real books about these girls in real time. So I didn't know these girls were real. I had no idea. But yeah, it does show how she is an outsider of the family while also being like almost doing everything with them. And there was a point, I forgot to say this because it was like such a small point. There was a point where before she asked to get a job, Ernest had asked her if she wanted a season. Like, do you want to do a season to get married? And that was like the first time anyone that wasn't a cousin, like really anyone who wasn't his daughter, was asked. Even Mildred would tell him, like, he never asked me this. Like, you're the only one he ever asked who wasn't like a daughter. But she had said no because she knew that if she had gotten a season, then she would be more or less stuck in the family and only seen as like one of the Guinnesses, but like a Guinness friend. You know, it wouldn't be like, oh, you're a part of the family. It'd be like, no, you're just here. And she didn't want to be more tangled in their lives anymore. Like, he had no identity. Your identity is now switched from being this poor Irish girl who has a brother to being now like this in this wealthy home who takes everything for granted, know nothing about the outside world. Now you're married to a man who only likes you because you're considered Guinness, not because of who you are. And she is a pretty smart girl, and she always understands what is going on around her, even though she doesn't always say. Which is why the girls love her so much, because she's not like one to like put her. She's not like Maureen. She's not very brash and outgoing, but she's not so reserved and no one knows what she's thinking. But her thoughts are always like, oh, she really truly knows what these girls are going through, and it's almost like she's a parent to them, so she doesn't take care of them like that. But it was a good book. It took me forever to finish. I'm not gonna lie to you, but it does really. It was a good book. I'm not sure to tell you. It was historical fiction though, because Felicity is fake, Huey is fake, Richard is fake, which is kind of funny because everything related to Felicity is fake, and the girls are real. The parents are real. Mildred and Gunny, from the author's note, are technically one person. They just split into two people for the book. But basically, Gunny is Mildred when she was younger, and Mildred, when she becomes a nurse and everything, is Mildred when she gets older and she moves on to her whole life. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. But overall, I don't know how to rate a book. I'm not sure what y'all do. How do y'all good read these books? I would give it a 3 out of 5. And that's only because I don't really understand the war part of the book. And there's parts of the book that I'm like, why do we learn so much about these people just to have like nothing occur with them? Like with the friends who were seen multiple times, like Baby, not even Elizabeth, but like other people who were doing those high parties. I know they were needed for the story to continue and you need extras, whatever. But they put so much emphasis on what they were going through that it was almost like not really given in the last chapter when they were like, oh, these are how like Elizabeth died and these people have kids and Baby and her like boyfriend, whatever. Like the boyfriend didn't make it, right? You knew their lives, but the people who were like Steven or Brian or these other, well, Brian was a cousin, so he doesn't count. I didn't talk about Brian because he wasn't really that important. But all those other people were never given an epilogue story. They weren't told about like how they grew up or how did their lives mean anything. It just kind of like gave me like 20 chapters with their names in it, and then the epilogue happens, and I'm like, okay, but what about like what happened to this person? Where'd he go? So I'm not sure. I like the book, but I feel like I spend more time being like, so why am I reading this book? You know, I'm not sure if I like the first book more, but the first book had me talking. But it was still a good book. I think it was nice knowing who these girls are because I had no idea that these girls were real. Didn't even know that the original family had daughters, but I guess it makes sense, right? So it is nice, but I don't think I don't think I'm gonna come back tomorrow and be like, wow, they really went through something. Like I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, it's cool, but I don't think I learned anything from like my next day. The first book was better. I'm not sure if I read the first book. It was like 4 or something. Maybe I said 3, I don't remember. But yeah, that is all for this video. I have to edit this now, so hopefully it is not too long. It is an hour. I love that for me. I will be editing this down a lot, I guess. But anyway, if you made this far and you liked my book thingy, I do it once a month because I need literally that much time to finish a book. But we are finally done with the Glorious Guinness Girls. And they were from, I don't even know where I got this book from. I got it from like a free bookstore. So yeah, but it's a really good book. I do like it. It wasn't super boring and not put me to sleep, but it did take 2 weeks off to not read because I was like, no, thank you. But I did like the book. So that is all for today because any longer and I'll be crying while editing. But I will see you guys next week for a new video because I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting a video that I'm supposed to be doing, and next week is 30 February. So thank you for the first month of the year because a lot has happened this month and I just but it's a good month. We're off to a good year and I love it here. So anyway, thank you guys for watching and see you in my next video. Bye bye.